Hello. Welcome to another episode of Navigating Cancer Together. I am your host, Talaya Dendy. Navigating Cancer Together has something for everyone facing cancer. Why? Because everyone is different with different needs, beliefs, and perspectives. Thank you for joining us for this episode. I encourage you to open your minds and your hearts. Navigating Cancer Together is everywhere. Make sure to subscribe and follow the show to stay updated on our latest episodes. Listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or your preferred podcast app or platform. Valued listeners, before I introduce our very special guest for today, I want you to keep this question in mind as you listen to what our special guest has to share. Christopher highlighted disparities in cancer care. What's one step you believe communities or individuals can take to build more trust in healthcare? I may share your responses on a future episode. Please leave responses at fanlist.com/NCT podcast, or you can send an email to nctpodcast@gmail.com. Feel free to respond to the question and also let me know your thoughts on this episode. Thank you. Today, our very special guest is Christopher Shaddock. He is a graduate student majoring in clinical mental health counseling at Franklin Pierce University. He was going to major in physical therapy, but during his undergraduate studies, he switched from clinical physiology to interdisciplinary studies with minors in human services, sociology, and music, concentrating in music performance. Christopher realized he could better serve as a counselor for veterans, those in recovery, and African American men dealing with prostate cancer. His research on prostate cancer revealed disparities in treatment, socioeconomic status, racial bias in care, and stereotypes preventing vulnerability. Christopher advocates for African American men with prostate cancer, believing that reaching one person can create a domino effect. Christopher, thank you so much for joining us today and welcome. I am so excited to have you joining us for Prostate Cancer Awareness Month.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here to tell my story and to advocate and bring awareness to this disease.
Thank you, Christopher. You have a lot of experience and valuable information to share. Before we really dive into the heart of the conversation, I'd love for our valued listeners to get to know you a little bit more. So please share something that is interesting or unique about yourself that might surprise them.
Well, I lived in Iceland for 11 years. When I say that, people are like, what? So it definitely was an experience. My kids were born and raised there, so they have dual citizenship. The first language is Icelandic. The second is English and a few of the other Scandinavian languages like Danish and Swedish, and a bit of German that they teach in the school there. I ended up there after I served 8 years of active duty with the Army. It was after my 2-year stint in the Middle East. I went from a very, very hot countries, Iraq and Kuwait. Average temperature was 150 degrees Fahrenheit. Then getting to Iceland, where average temperature is, I don't know, 25, 30 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's like 5 degrees Celsius, somewhere around there, I think. It was an adjustment because of the all-night darkness during the winter and then the all-day light during the summer. It took a couple of years to get adjusted. It was fun, though. I go back and forth to visit my kids and friends and things like that. So that's the one thing that I start off with first.
Wow. So your kids stayed.
Yes.
Oh, wow. What do you do for fun there? I mean, it just seems so cold and dark.
My kids grew up on the east coast of the island in a village. It was like less than 600 people. Yes, I did stand out. um, but, just normal things. The kids can go out and play. You don't have to worry about things because it's such a small village. Everyone helps everybody, particularly like when there's snowstorms. So the kind of snowstorms that I grew up in the Boston area are nothing like the snowstorms in Iceland. I think the worst storm I dealt with when I lived there lasted 3 weeks. So if anybody remembers the blizzard of 1978, I was 11 years old at that time. So imagine that storm 1978, lasting 3 weeks at full tilt. I've seen rescue teams be rescued by rescue teams. So that's how
Wow.
sometimes it gets bad. The normal ice skating, good fishing, hunting, berry picking during the summertime. Berries are everywhere. Rhubarb, you get to the neighbors, like, are you guys going to use up the rest of the rhubarb? No, take it. Just go in there, make rhubarb jam and things like that. In the capital, in Reykjavik, just like any other metropolis, they love blues and jazz there. So every time I would get to Reykjavik, go to a blues bar. I've seen many jazz greats and blues greats there during festivals. It's a lot more modern than people think.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm trying to wrap my brain around it. I don't know if I even want to visit, but thank you so much for sharing. And um,
It's good. It's only a 5 hour flight from Boston to Iceland. And if you're used to volcanoes, I was there when that major volcanic eruption happened in 2010. Yeah, that was pretty bad. And there's a volcano that's still erupting. It has been erupting for the past about year and a half now. Just lava flow. You get used to it and the earthquakes.
yes, wow. So you get everything is what you're saying. You get a lot
Yes.
of different things there.
Hmm. Still
Okay.
fun to go visit.
Okay. Okay. I think someone had shared with me, I think they have a really good educational system there.
They do. They
Okay.
do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, sadly to say, their educational system for their kids are much better than ours because they urged kids to stick with the arts. Those are the first things that get cut here in the States. There, they urge kids at first grade. Now, my daughter, she plays like 8 to 10 different instruments. She's got an album out. She's on Spotify. So she just went with that arts. She sings, writes her own music. She paints and draws. My youngest plays the bass. My other kid's there, plays the guitar. So when it's dark and snowstorm, what else are you going to do? You're stuck in the house and you're going to practice either any kind of music or draw and paint. So, yeah.
You have some very talented children. The next question I have for you, Christopher, is what is something that brings you joy and lights you up?
I think one of the things is, and I think we touched on this before, when being in recovery, when I go to AA meetings and when I'm a speaker and share my story of like during the pandemic, when I lost a lot of family members over the years, in recent years, and during the pandemic, going through treatments and, almost losing my sobriety, either because of a family loss or the fact that the side effects from the treatments was just too great. It's like, I just kept going. So when I share that and I see people early on in their recovery, afterwards, they come up to me and say, well, if you got through all that, I can do this as well. So when I hear that, that does put a smile on my face because I went through a lot during my cancer treatments. Every other week, there was always something. And I got through it and I'm here to talk about it. I have my days, not going to lie. The desire is always there despite having 14 years of sobriety, but it's like, it's not going to change anything. Um, it's the pain from the treatments, the chronic side effects are still going to be there. I just adjust on what I do. And then when I talk about that and people will say, well, how did you get through it? So, well, I talked about it. Anything that happened, if you don't talk about it, it festers. You got like a big zit. I like using analogies. And then, that zit explodes and that's when bad things happen. So talking about it, treating that zit to go down, less and less helps. And I always talk about it. And I tell others, whatever it is, if you got a hangnail and if it's upsetting you, talk about it. Because the smallest things can cause a person to relapse. I've been through the worst. I worry about those, but I also worry about the small things. So that's what brings me joy, sharing my story at meetings, saying that, I got through it. I'm still here.
Thank you so much for showing up today to share your story here. Now we'll transition more into talking about your cancer diagnosis. In 2019, you were diagnosed with prostate cancer. Please tell us more about your experience and what that meant to you.
Well, how I found out was was like a slap in the face. I had an MRI done on my prostate. And then a few weeks later, I went in for a biopsy. So as I am on the table and the surgeon was about to start the procedure, and he kept talking about, the radiologist found an area of concern on your prostate. He basically told me that I have cancer. And I said, nobody from the radiology contacted me. And he said, what? Like, yeah, this is the first time I'm hearing that there is a problem with, you know, a prostate. It's like, you basically told me I have cancer. No one told me about this. So it took him a moment to compose himself. And I could feel the rage that he was holding back. So there was like a med student in there documenting everything. And he just calmly said, once we're done with this procedure, please contact the radiology at the MGH campus in Chelsea, Mass. Needless to say that he read them the riot act. And then he ended up being my surgeon. So afterwards, after that procedure, went into his office and he said, well, okay, these are like the list of treatments, and we'll meet with a radiation oncologist and an oncologist. So 2 weeks after that, I met with all of them and I just said, okay, it's somewhat taking me time to adjust to this. You never adjust to that diagnosis. And one of my sisters, Diane, who at that time dealt with her battle with breast cancer, she came to that appointment with me, obviously for support. And I just said, okay, don't sugarcoat anything. Give me the good, give me the bad, and give me the indifferent. I have a physiology and anatomy background because of 20 plus years in fitness. In the Army, nothing really phases me, except for this, though. So, so they were like, okay, here's the option with radiation. Here's the option, you can have surgery or not, hormone therapy. And I said, well, okay, if I go through all this, will the cancer come back? And they said, we don't know. I said, well, good. That's an honest answer. I don't want to say, oh, okay, you'll be fine, because they tell me I'm fine. Then in a couple of years, it comes back. I'm like, you said I was fine. Well, yeah, when someone starts off with, well,
Mhm. You know.
yeah, exactly. So, and they did say that because of the amount of radiation that I will be exposed to, I will get cancer again because of the radiation. I said, well, that I knew because I knew a lot of people who had intense radiation therapy and the cancer came back, different areas. I said, well, if that's why I have to battle it now, so be it. And we'll see what happens. So far, knock on wood, the cancer has not come back, but the side effects, the chronic side effects that I have to deal with does change your life. And there were some that they did tell me. Then there were others that they didn't, that I found on my own through research and skimming through medical journals. It is what it is. And again, I look back, I don't know how I got through it because I just put my head down and, okay, let's just get through the treatments. I think it took me a year to actually tell myself that I have cancer. So I allowed myself to feel that part. But that didn't happen. That only happened when I lost one of my cousins to COVID, and I was coming towards the end of radiation therapy and weren't able to go to the funeral because the things were limited and isolated at that time. And yeah, no, it just hit me after a session. I came home and I just broke down. So yeah, it was that first year was very tough because I had surgery. Then 2 months later, I started hormone therapy for a year. And then 4 months after that, I had like 45 daily sessions of radiation that was like 15 to 30 minutes, depending on what needed to be done. Thinking back, I always get emotional when I think back going through that and yeah, how I just got through it. But I got through it very slowly and hard. And I think the emotional and spiritual aspect of it was a lot harder to deal with than the physical aspect because it was the fear of the unknown. And like I said, during the pandemic, I met a lot of cancer patients who their treatments were stopped by their doctors. So it was like, am I going to be next? You know, And I contacted my team and said, no, we're still going to see you. We have to adjust, obviously, because of that. But no, we got you. I said, oh, thank you. That's one of the many relieves, that were lifted from my shoulders. Yeah, it was difficult, extremely difficult.
Thank you so much for sharing, Christopher. And I'm so glad that you haven't received another cancer diagnosis and you're doing pretty good. You touched on so many things in what you just shared. And the emotional piece is one that really is not addressed well enough. It's not really even talked about, to be honest, not to the level that it needs to be. There's really no preparation for it. No one says these are the things that you're going to go through emotionally. And I really think that needs to be out in the forefront. I mean, typically when someone gets treatment like chemotherapy or radiation, they typically do a pretty good job of saying, oh, you're going to have fatigue, you're going to have this, you're going to have that, whatever. But they really don't talk about the emotional hits that a person typically takes. And in addition to the radiation, the surgery, the hormone therapy, and the emotional aspects of your experience with cancer, prostate cancer, were there any other side effects that you would like the men out there to know about?
Aside from the incontinence that's common, they don't tell you about the radiation proctitis. So, radiation proctitis is inflammation of the rectum. I was bleeding and there was a lot of pain. So, I went and had another colonoscopy to make sure that, the colon didn't come back in my colon. And my gastroenterologist said that this is common for prostate cancer patients and for like women with cervical cancer as well because of the amount of radiation. So it's like, well, it doesn't go away. It gets worse over time. I'm like, oh, that's great. So I have to use a steroid corticosteroid foam like twice a week. If I don't use it, inflammation gets worse and, the bleeding comes back. Another part of the radiation that they don't tell you, I was urinating blood very badly, but that took a year to happen. And come to find out that several blood vessels in my urethra were busted because of the radiation. And that caused my kidneys and my bladder to be infected. It was very painful when your kidneys are twice its normal size, as well as your bladder. So they had to do a cystoscopy going through the urethra with a camera and look. And sure enough, there were about three or four blood vessels busted just above the opening of the bladder. I was awake. I look at everything. When I tell this, people are like, how can you be awake? It's like, well, it's my body. I want to see what he's doing and what he's looking at so I can, you know, share this. So he said, we need to go back in and do laser surgery because if one or two blood clots got into that opening, the bladder, that would prevent me from urinating. Then that backs up sepsis. Then it's over. So about a month and a half later, had surgery. And of course, he said, there'll be constant bleeding from that. More side effects from the hormone therapy, weight loss, muscle loss, weight gain, and every side effect from menopause that women go through. Because the injections that I got, one injection lasted 6 months. So instead of me spending like an hour and a half each way going back and forth to downtown Boston for something that takes like 5 seconds, I'd go in, get the injection, 6 months later, come back. But because of the intensity, I got all the side effects from menopause. I just made a joke of it. I called myself, instead of Chris, you can call me Christina. And you have to laugh about it, or else it's going to, emotionally, it will destroy you. Hot flashes that would last over an hour. I remember when I was going to community college and I lived a mile away, but I wasn't able to physically drive because I had a manual Jeep at the time because of the surgery. So I would walk. That was a bad thing to do just because of pride. I was like, I can do this. I'm not going to ask for a ride. It was a bad mistake because of the fatigue from hormone therapy and radiation is on a different level. From a different reality, actually. And this was during the winter. So it could be 15 degrees outside. I'm carrying my winter coat because I'm burning hot. One time I couldn't walk anymore. So I just laid down in a pile of snow and kind of covered up. It's like, oh, this feels good. And the car pulls up. Chris, is that you? I'm like, well, hey, how's it going? One of my friends who's going to school was like, dummy, get in the car. Of course, I was drenched in sweat and from the snow. And then once I cooled down, of course, I was freezing. So I had to bring a change of clothes every day because of the hot flashes. I had mood swings. I would forget a lot. I would cry at a cupcake commercial. It was like, oh, okay, now I understand what women go through when they hit menopause. So women out there, I get it. um, and another one of the side effects from the surgery, lymphedema, is is a common side effect. Now, lymphedema is the inflammation of the lymph nodes, and we have lymph nodes throughout our body. So women and men get breast cancer too. So if they have surgery, the inflammation, like in the armpits, affect the shoulders, affect the arms. But in my case, lymph nodes in my pelvic area and my legs were inflamed. So my leg was twice its size, and my leg felt like it was dipped in acid, but I couldn't move. So one or two steps, and I collapsed on the floor, and that took about 3, 4 months to dissipate. Like, we'll give you medication. No, I have enough side effects to deal with as it is. I don't need 20 more side effects from a medication to handle one thing. Yeah, it was, I think, one of the dumbest things I did 2 months after that surgery, and it was still reasonably warm. And where I used to live down the road was a park. And one of my friends came over with her dog, and we're going to go for a walk. She's like, are you up for it? Like, yeah, I feel good. And we started walking. I said, no, I can't. I'll wait for you under a partition on a bench. And then I started to have a hot flash, and it was still warm outside. I'm like, I need to go back to my air conditioned apartment. Now, normally it was like an 8 minute walk. It took me 30 minutes
Mm.
to get back. And I had to cross the street, and I was in so much pain, I couldn't walk. So, and I'm telling on myself for this, I crawled across the street. As I'm crawling, I'm like, how bad does this look? And thankfully no cars came and no one was around. So once I got to the other side on the sidewalk, I stood up and I just took my time, walk. Once I finally got back to my apartment, my friend calls me, oh my God, where are you? It's like I walked home. I'm not gonna repeat what she said,
I
but
can imagine.
she was very upset. And she came over and she's like, are you okay? I'm like, no, I should not have walked. And I'm drenched in sweat. It's like, do you need anything? It's like, could you go to the store and get me some more water and cranberry juice and things like that? Yeah, those from my treatments, those side effects are no joke. And thankfully, lymphedema is gone. But things from the radiation that pop up, still linger. I still have pain. And one of the things that I'm now diagnosed with that happened from the antibiotics that I was on to kill the infections in my organs that I was hospitalized for about 4 days gave me this diagnosis of persistent perceptual postural dizziness, which means I am dizzy 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It does not go away. People will say, oh, it's vertigo. You did not hear me say vertigo. Vertigo comes and goes. My dizziness stays. I have a hard time driving, let alone walking. And it's hard to focus on anything. So having to adjust my life around that as well, it gets frustrating. And there are times when I'm too dizzy. That's like I have to lay down because I can't do anything. Then that when it gets too bad, the migraines increase. I get nauseous, and that just stems from the treatments. It's not much I can do, but just adjust as best I can.
Wow, Christopher, thank you so much for sharing that information. I know it's going to help a lot of men out there listening. How did you feel when some of these side effects became apparent? Were you aware of some of them? Were some of them surprises?
Some of them I already knew, like from research and from discussing with my team of doctors. The others, like I said, the radiation proctitis, the busted blood vessels, Those were new. They didn't tell me about that. And I wanted to reach out. Why didn't you tell me about this? But I'm like, what's the point?
Mm-hmm.
So I just did more research from these two. And so, yeah, this is a common thing that was not in the information that I was given. And I started to sit and think, why didn't they tell me? Why didn't they tell me? It's like maybe it didn't cross their mind. I mean, I don't know. So to try and get an answer from that would just make things worse. So it's like, all right, it happened. This is, a couple of years later. It's not cancer. It's not back, but these are just things from radiation. And I know enough about radiation to like know that it changes your DNA. It just changes everything. And researching other symptoms of radiation therapy to make sure, like, are there other things down the pike that will pop up? So far, nothing, again, knock on wood, other than the cancer coming back in my bladder or in pelvic bowl, rectal cancer, back in my lymph nodes, where it spread to. I can't think of anything else in terms of like symptoms, at least from the radiation anyway. The hormone therapy, that I wasn't a pre-diabetic. The hormone therapy made me a pre-diabetic. I was able to kind of bring my A1C levels down. Again, being African American and high risk, diabetes is huge in the community, along with cholesterol. I had high cholesterol, but it had elevated it. So I'm like, oh, great. So chipping away at that as well. Yeah, no, there are just some things that, at least from the hormone therapy, the Lupron just elevated and caused a lot of other things. So that made me, just research. Okay, I was on this. What do these other things increase? The surgery, it was the lymphedema. Yeah. Thankfully, I didn't have chemo because I know that can cause a lot of other things, but I had enough treatments
You
as it
did.
is. I had three. I didn't need number four all at
Mhm.
once.
Thank you, Christopher, for sharing that because I think it's so important for people listening, men listening out there, to really understand what these treatments entail so that you can make, the best decisions for yourselves. You can make informed decisions, but then you can also understand how these treatments can impact your quality of life. If you're out there listening, just make sure you understand and get as much research information as you can about these treatments that you're planning on taking or these surgeries so that you can at least start to somewhat prepare yourself, emotionally and mentally for what may come down the road because uncertainty is another big part of cancer that is really tough for a lot of people. And by listening to Christopher's experience, of course, everyone's experience is different, but these are some things that could or could not happen, but it's just good to be aware. Christopher, in a previous conversation, we touched on some disparities that you experienced on your prostate cancer journey. From your experience, what's the most critical barrier preventing African American men from early diagnosis or effective treatment?
I mean, there are so many. Obviously, the health disparity within the Black community, the health and racial disparity, and the lack of knowledge about prostate cancer, about the prostate itself, and the men not opening up about it if they're diagnosed or if they feel something's wrong. I'm not going to go get tested. You know, if I don't think about it, it'll go away. That is not true. It's still going to be there. I remember my brother and one of our uncles a couple of years ago went through prostate cancer. Thankfully, they only had radiation. They had their PSA was very low, but I told them, I said, this is what you're going to run into. And I told them what I went through. I told them what the doctors will say. And sure enough, after meeting with their doctors, they said, "Oh, you what you told us." They said the same thing, and I said, "With the radiation, you're going to be tired. Fatigue is on a different level. Even if you just got a few minutes of radiation a day, both of them did. Like the fatigue, you'll be tired, but that will last from your last session. It'll last about 3 months. You'll have incontinence. Hopefully, down the road, you won't have the bleeding from both ends that I went through. It's like, but talk about it. If you're going through any kind of symptom, talk about it. Don't brush it off. And I know some of the things can be embarrassing, like with the incontinence. You don't have control of urine flow. And at some point, you'll have to wear like a pad or an adult diaper because some are worse than others. I still have to wear a pad because the incontinence 6 years later from my surgery, it hasn't gone away. It's not as bad as it was, but I'd rather wear a pad and be safe. And there were a few times when I'd forget. And thankfully, I wore black jeans. It's like I am out in public and something happened. This is embarrassing, but nobody knew, And it is, I'm not gonna lie, it is embarrassing. But what are you going to do about it? Are you going to take control or have this control you? We've had enough of being controlled. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. But
Podcast. We need
yeah,
another day, actually.
exactly. But taking control of symptoms that will plague you makes you feel better. And again, I make a joke of it. You have to, because if you let it rule you, the anger and the depression, everything else around you will be worse. And the people who want to help you, your loved ones, will stop. And then you're left alone. I've seen people go through that and they become twice as bitter. It's like, oh, see, they left him because I have cancer. No, they left you because you pushed them away. You have to find people that you trust to talk about what you're going through. And so like when I get low on pads, I go to my girlfriend and I say, hey, we're both low on pads. Let's go, pad shopping together. And she just looks at me and shakes her head. Like, what's wrong with you? I'm like, well, I have to laugh about it. And, I do. First it was like I'm picking up pads for men. And afterwards, like, I don't care, because at the end of the day, I have to take care of me. They're not going to do it. People can say stuff. Okay, great. All I just say is, walk a mile in my shoes with this and see how well you'll do. Um,
Mm.
And yeah, it's not easy, but you have to talk about those embarrassing situations. Because if you don't, you know, it'll take hold of you, it will control you, and things can get worse to a point where it won't be treatable. So, all the listeners out there, guys, you got to talk about it. Get screened. Find someone that you fully trust, whether it's your wife, girlfriend, partner, brother, sister, your best friend, whomever it is, find someone, talk about it, get to a support group. I've been with a veterans cancer support group for 5 years, and that helped quite a bit because everyone else in there, even though the cancers are different from each other, we all have the same symptoms and, help me talk about it. And I talk about it outside of that group to other people. And they may laugh or have a shocked look on their face when I talk about the pads and the incontinence. Like, well, it's part of it. It's part of my life now. I can't deny it. If you deny it, it just gets worse. So it's that living life after cancer adjustment that is the most difficult. But if you tackle it and if you have support, it does get easier.
I have so many thoughts because you touched on so many things that can be really tough for men to say out loud because of the stigmas and
Hmm.
masculinity and all of those things. And I want to ask you this question. And if you don't feel comfortable, you don't have to answer it. Just let me know. But I'm thinking back to another conversation I had with a gentleman who had prostate cancer, and it really impacted his marriage. And I believe his wife ended up leaving him. How did your prostate cancer diagnosis impact your relationship with your girlfriend?
Didn't, because it was like, there are other ways. And thankfully, I don't have an issue.
Mhm.
And of course, that was in my head. It's like, well, okay, what's going to happen? She's going to leave me for this because of, it's like, no, I am here to support you regardless. I know that, she said, I know from what you've told me and your experience, other men that you known, their relationships ended, whether they were married or not, because of that. And it was either because the woman left because the man would have difficulty at first, or she left because her partner did not open up. And yet I opened up. I said, well, this is what I dealt with. This can be an issue now and then. And sometimes it is, and other times it's not. But there are ways out there to help men. But again, it is a difficult subject to talk about. But if you talk about it, 9 times out of 10, your partner will be there to support. It's like, okay, what can we do to get past this? There are so many ways. Let's find a path and do this together. It's easier said than done. But again, if you have the right support system, then get you through it.
If you are out there listening, male or female, depending upon where you are in your relationship, it's something that is going to take dedication, commitment, and most importantly, communication. I just want to applaud you for just talking so freely about your experience. I want to give kudos to your girlfriend for just really sticking around and sticking through because it happens to men and women. They get this diagnosis, and for whatever reason, their spouse or their partner ends up leaving them. And then that adds another layer to this already difficult situation. Thank you so much for just walking us through that because that's not something we talk about a lot either. Cancer has such a huge impact on everyone involved. And this is a great example of how communicating, being open can actually bring you closer together. You are sitting here freely sharing your story, which I so appreciate. Other than like stigmas, why do you believe it's hard for other Black men or African American men to really open up and share their stories?
I think because they don't want to be that vulnerable. They feel that being that vulnerable, they look weak to everyone else. And I got that. I was the same way. It's like grew up in Roxbury, Mass, very tough neighborhood, tough town, served my country, was deployed in the war zone. I did this, I did that, I'm this, I'm that, blah. And when I was able to accept all that, this isn't 1950 where, walk around, oh man, I'm not going to talk about it. I'm tough. Yeah, I tossed that out the window because it gets you nowhere. But again, it's one of those things that's easier said than done. But again, I surrounded myself with people, my family, huge family. And every time I went in for surgery, there'd be 20 of us. We take over the lobby. Like, this is how we Shaddocks roll. It's just, then afterwards, we just talk about it. Talked about it with my sister Diane. And even though she went through some things, she would even come out and say that, I can only imagine what you have to deal with because cancer and treatments were a lot more aggressive than mine. But I still talk to her about it because she understood to a certain point. Before our mom passed away last year, I would talk to her about things. And, of course, she's like, well, I'm going to come out there and take care of you. Like, Mom, you have your own issues, but thank you. But I would just talk to her about it. And I talked to my brother, one of my uncles that I mentioned who went through his cancer treatment, his radiation 2 or 3 years ago. I talked to him about it. And I said, if you want to talk about what you're feeling, just let me know because I was there, and I am still there. Because sometimes I think back to those treatments and the feeling of being exposed and vulnerable and, the embarrassment of talking about certain things. But it's like, well, it helped and it still helps. Now and then embarrassment will come up. And I'm not going to sit here and say that it goes away. It doesn't, but it gets easier to talk about it. So it just boils down to being vulnerable and who you can really trust when you're vulnerable. And when you can trust, all it takes is one person that you can trust. If you can trust one person, you can be vulnerable and you'll get through it.
What is one crucial step that men can take to ensure they receive the best possible care, especially when they are facing medical mistrust?
Advocate for yourself. If you feel like, if you meet like one doctor and if you feel unsure So you know what? I'm going to get a second opinion because that's your right. They can't hold you to that. You go and meet, if you have to go through 10 doctors to like, all right, number 10, we connect. I resonate with what you're saying. We're on the same vibe. That's all it takes. Again, I was lucky enough with my team because they were like, okay, we're going to get you through this. We're going to do this. Do you have any questions? Yeah. And if something I didn't know, because I haven't researched it yet, I would just ask a question. What about this? And, they would respond. And when I said that, don't sugarcoat anything. If you don't know, please tell me. Don't try and fake it to make it. You've got several letters after your name doesn't mean that you know everything. And of course, again, they were shocked. Like, okay, here's somebody who was standing up, who's advocating. Boom. And some of them would say that, yeah, if I don't know something, I will ask someone who is more specialized. So it's just finding that right doctor, that's got the bedside manner. If they don't have that bedside manner, walk away, find someone else.
Great advice. Thank you, Christopher. The other thing I think is really important to talk about because life is going on no matter when cancer shows up, life is still happening. And so you've worked through sobriety and cancer. How has your experience with sobriety informed your approach to navigating your cancer journey and advocating for your health?
It was very difficult. At the time when I was going for my undergrad and just finished up treatments and the lingering effects and everything, I was going for physical therapy. But even then, I was unsure. And then what made me switch gears was because a lot of the physiology classes, you're in the gym, you're physical. It's like, I can't do this because of the cancer. And if I tried to push myself, I would have hurt myself. And yeah, that would have probably caused me to relapse because I am no longer physically capable of doing things that I wanted to do. Pre-cancer, I was diagnosed before my 52nd birthday. I was still bench pressing 300 pounds and squatting 350, because of background on fitness and a former personal trainer and things like that. But the treatments took that all away. So I switched to things more of my mental health. So I got my undergrad in interdisciplinary studies with minors in sociology, human services, and music performance. And now I'm in grad school for clinical mental health counseling. And that helped me to mentally deal with a lot of things, but with, you know, dealing with the treatments and the side effects. Yeah, I don't know if that answered your question. um,
Yeah.
I navigated through all that by working on my emotional, mental, and spiritual strength a lot more than my physical strength that I lost.
Mhm.
That's what I wanted to say.
All right. Beautifully said. Christopher, I think that that is something else we really don't talk about is if someone is working through sobriety and then you get a cancer diagnosis, that can have an extreme impact on one's sobriety. The other part of it is that we really don't talk about a lot is if someone does have a problem with addiction or drinking drugs and they're taking these medications, these chemotherapies and radiation and whatever else, they can counter interact and cause additional problems. And so this is another thing for people to be aware of also is like if you're struggling, make sure you get help. This is the time because it could really impact the treatments and kind of have another negative effect.
Exactly. Remember, after my surgery, they gave me Oxycontin, and I said, no, I'm no longer taking this because, coming out of surgery. And of course, they pumped that into me when I was in my room. And they were like, here, take this. Of course, I'm taking it. It wasn't until I got home till I realized that, oh, no, I can't take this because they wanted me to take it every 4 hours. And I was so still doped up. And when I forgot, I think I slept for like 2 days straight. When it kind of got out of my system, I was having the shakes. And I'm like, why am I shaking? And I looked at the bottle. I said, no, this is why. So I found out just how high my threshold of pain is because I had the catheter. I had to have a catheter in for 2 weeks. And yeah, I wasn't taking Oxycontin, because it's like, if I continue to take this, this will cause me to relapse. People were saying, well, you can get marijuana for medicinal purposes to help with the nausea and pain. Nope. Nope. That will cause me to relapse. Like, you guys do not understand this. So take Tylenol, which did nothing. And I don't want to take obviously too much, because then too much of Tylenol or aspirin or whatever will just do damage to your stomach. It's like, I already got enough that I'm dealing with already. So I just dealt with the pain, because the alternative is worse.
Thank you just for being so honest about all of it. Because again, if we don't talk about these things, people can't get the help that they need. It's just life changing to have someone like you just be so open with your experience, because it just lets people know that it's okay. This is a part of life. These are things that we have to go through and experience. I want to shift a little bit. One thing I think
Mm-hmm.
is really important as well is you have a family history of cancer, and you have a lot of experience with the military, you have your veterans experience. What are some shared lessons about health, trust, or advocacy that you would like to offer to family members, to other veterans?
Find those support groups. Like I said, through the VA, one of my case managers got me into this veterans cancer support group. That helped. Zero prostate cancer, an organization that I joined that has helped me. A woman, Landy Maduro, who created this documentary back in 2012, 2013 called The Silent Killer, prostate cancer within the African American community. So I reached out to her, told her my story, and now I am a pledge ambassador for her next documentary called The Ties That Bind. It's a plug there. And I will be sharing my story in her next documentary that's going to start filming by the end of this year. So getting with her, sharing, the story, getting involved in, like the American Cancer Society legislator, and, signing petitions because of now, again, it's a rabbit hole I won't go down, but things that are being cut. And those funds include cancer research of all kinds of cancer they wanted to cut. And, just advocating. I did a thesis on prostate cancer and how it afflicts African American men, and all the research, all the medical journals, people that I've talked to. The support is out there. They're not going to tell you. You have to research yourself. If you can't get to like a support group, of course, because of the pandemic, telehealth exploded. I joined a few early on in my treatments. I attended some support groups. It's not in person, but it did help. And you make those long lasting connections with people that could be in friggin' Alaska, or they could be right next door to you. You don't know, but go and just research support groups. They are out there. You just have to take the time and advocate for yourself, because they're not going to do it for you. You've got to do it for yourself. So if you want best for yourself, or someone who is struggling and won't do it, it's like, you know what? I'm going to do it for you, whether you like it or not, because we want you here still.
What does navigating cancer together mean to you?
It means bringing awareness to a population that doesn't know about this, doesn't fully know about it. They may know like baseline of prostate cancer, but they don't know anything. There's no knowledge beyond that. So with this platform, this Navigating Cancer Together, bringing awareness to people who, with whatever socioeconomic status you're at, this will help bring that awareness to them. And hopefully it will open their eyes as well as their ears. And all it takes is one person. One person can create a domino effect. And I think this will be it.
And to that point, Christopher, one person creating a domino effect, can you share an example of what the domino effect looks like in practice? And what gives you hope for the future of prostate cancer outcomes in the Black community?
Well, because of what I went through, I shifted my educational gears to be a counselor, because I want to counsel other men, particularly African American men who are going through prostate cancer, whether it's your baseline prostate cancer or aggressive prostate cancer, like what I endured. Another domino effect, I mentioned my sister Diane Austin, who went through breast cancer, and she was met with a racial block when she lost her hair and she went to try and find a wig that matched the hair that she was born with. The clerk just said to her, you can buy one of our straight wigs and do whatever it is that you people do. That didn't sit well. So, long story short, she created, along with another sister of ours, they created this company called Coils to Locks. They're nationwide, I think to include Canada, wigs, Afrocentric, kinky curly wigs for women of color. Diane and I both were on a show called Beyond Thriving that Robin Roberts started after her cancer journey. That was back in 2020. So those are the kind of domino effects that we take. Something life threatening. We used our experience for something good, and it has caused a domino effect to bring awareness to help people who don't have a voice. And for those who have a voice, we educate them, and it grows to help those who are voiceless when it comes to this, who have met with the racial disparity and the health disparity and the lack of knowledge. So that's what I'm trying to do, create that domino effect. And it has helped. Helped my brother, helped my uncle, which they in turn helped other people who, were diagnosed with prostate cancer. In AA meetings, when I talked about my cancer stuff, it prompted them to, like, well, listening to you, I need to go get checked. When I was at Fitchburg State, a few professors, when they saw my paper, got them going. So the domino effect is happening.
I have to agree. So many wonderful things have come out of a very tough situation. And I just want to thank you again, Christopher. It has been an honor to talk with you today. I appreciate everything that you are doing to help men, to help Black and African American men. We need to have these conversations more. Before we end, is there anything else, Christopher, that you would like to share that you have not had an opportunity to share?
I just hope that those who are listening, that will prompt you to help someone that you know, or if you're going through it yourself, to research, advocate for yourself. Prostate Cancer Foundation. And one thing I wanted to almost forgot. There is an African American prostate cancer study called Respond. I am a part of the study. They are looking for 10,000 African American men nationwide to participate in the study. Please research that. I believe it's through the Prostate Cancer Foundation. Yes, if you are diagnosed with prostate cancer, be a part of this study. They look at everything from your environment, sociological background, psychological background. The survey is long, but it's worth it in the end. So that's what I wanted to add in before we end.
I think that is a great way to end because we need to get more involved in the research. Because if we, as Black and African American people, are not involved in these studies, they can't help us. So it's so important to take part in those studies. Christopher, I want to thank you so much for taking some time to talk with me today. I know that the information that you have shared will really touch so many lives, so many men facing prostate cancer. It's been an honor to have you on the show.
Thank you. It's been an honor being here and doing this. Thank you again.
My pleasure. Thank you. Valued listeners, the question that I have for you is, after Christopher highlighted disparities in cancer care, what's one step you believe communities or individuals can take to build more trust in healthcare? Please send your responses to fanlist.com/NCT podcast, or you can respond via email at nctpodcast@gmail.com. Share your thoughts on this episode. I may read your responses during future episodes. Please share this podcast with the men in your life who could really benefit from hearing and learning more about prostate cancer and the importance of talking with others about your experiences. There is so much value wrapped up in this episode. So again, please share it with the men in your life. I would like to give a shout out to the Navigating Cancer Together community and valued listeners. Thank you for joining us today. That is it for this Wednesday. And until next time, let's keep navigating cancer together. Take care.